Hey guys, it's Sam's reporting for Sam's Scoops. This week I have one nationwide consumer story for you and then another multi-part investigation that hits a little bit closer to home for you guys here in South Carolina. So we'll kick off with that one. It's from the Greenville News, who does amazing investigative work. And this time they did a piece on police shootings. So it's called Lethal Force, and it kicked off a 6-month investigation after a particular incident in 2018. And I'm going to pull up the camera here, or the video here. They actually included body cam footage. Whoops, if we can kind of look at that here. And so this is the incident that happened. Of course, I'm backwards now. And so this is the guy who called. He was having a mental breakdown when he called authorities, and he has a knife in his hand, if you can make that out, but he wasn't dropping it, and so the police ended up shooting and killing him. That's his fiance there, I believe. And so they shot and killed him. And the Greenville News, the reporters kind of thought, well, how often does this happen? Let's get a better feel on this. And so they requested data from SLED and the FBI, and over a 10-year period, and found that Greenville County, yeah, this happens a lot. It's actually, I believe, twice as much as any other county in the state, 31 over the last 10 years. Yep, twice as many. But of those that reported, of those 31, none of the officers, or I think it was deputies in this case, had any wrongdoing. Nothing was considered wrong, they weren't reprimanded at all, and everything was just peachy. But beyond that, what they also kind of found is it was inconsistent when they reported shootings to SLED, and that they would have these data for. But the thing is, you're not actually required to report these shootings and incidences to SLED or even to the FBI. The FBI just started collecting this data in 2019, but it was purely voluntary by agencies. Looking a little bit deeper into the data, because it's not required, there's also inconsistencies of the information submitted. So like the race and different components of that weren't always consistent. So, Greenville News had a little bit of a difficulty kind of drawing conclusions or comparisons, things like that. Another problematic thing that they found were body cameras weren't always used. People would wait days or weeks to kind of speak up or report these kind of incidents. And so that was, a little bit interesting. One of the major things that I found interesting in this is there was multiple officers tied to multiple shootings who also had a history, I believe, of, excessive use of force and things like this. So they have an expert that kind of speaks on this, but we have this perception growing throughout the country that, cops use this excessive force, but we have good cops out there, and it's very few is what this expert was saying. And some of this data kind of shows that if you're tied to multiple shootings, with a history too, and nothing's being done, that might be a little bit problematic. What else? Just because there were some deputies getting reprimanded for shootings that weren't logged in the FBI or SLED data, and so this would be things like accidental discharge of their weapons. They would get reprimanded for that, but that didn't get reported. So really they did a really good in-depth dive in here. They even considered, what could be done to fix this, and in some areas to draw that, kind of decrease that negative perception from the public and officers. They had a citizens kind of review board, and the citizens were able to come in and help. I believe that's what it's called. The citizens oversight. They're kind of come in when these cases happen and give their opinions and give like a third-party insight. But Greenville County said, nope, that's never happening here. Citizens shouldn't help determine whether police officers have used appropriate force in an incident. So that was interesting. Also, just because people haven't been reprimanded, the county has still gotten $600,000 in payouts over, 9 or 10 lawsuits that have happened in the last 10 years. So there is consequences from victims' families that are happening there. So it's a really good in-depth piece, making sure I covered everything for you guys. But if you have a rainy or cold day coming up, I would just sit down, and they have videos and photos and multi-parts, and they do a good job updating it. So I'm sure there's like 3 more articles that have been published since I even broke this all down for you guys. But the second story I mentioned is a nationwide consumer story. It's over the company called Real, which I've never heard of before, but I do not buy designer clothes. But once I read this article, ads were popping up all the time over this, so the government is watching us. But the Real, this story comes out of CNBC, where I actually used to work, and it's a consignment store for luxury goods. And so I'm going to give you a peep here of their website. So yeah, they just sell like a bunch of dresses and clothes, and their kind of gimmick here is that everything is supposed to be authenticated and 100% real, and they have expert checkers and everything who make sure that is the case. But since I'm talking about it here on my investigative story, you know that is not the case that happened. And irony of irony, the CNBC found that Real does not always sell real products. And so they spoke to multiple different employees, former employees, they spoke to customers, and they obtained inside database knowledge and things like that to kind of reveal that, yeah, they weren't holding up their end of the bargain. And so they read, nearly 14,000 reviews of the company and found that fakes, damaged goods, and mistakes are the top complaint. And so when they kind of looked into, well, why is this the case? They found that some of the workers had quotas where they had to authenticate such and such amount of products every day. And so that led to fakes, because if you're under the gun, you're stressed, you have to meet more. But then who they were having the that's a hard word. who they were letting authenticate these products was copywriters in some instances. And employees would go on camera for this piece and say, I don't think I had enough training to recognize, this bag from this bag and give it the okay. So sometimes they kind of go into the detail of how little of the stitches it comes down to, I guess, to kind of differentiate a fake. And so only the real experts would look at the most expensive brands and things like that. And so one of those internal documents that CNBC found was a checklist of who was authenticating what and what the quotas were for each day. And so they were able to verify that. So yeah, there's a quote that's like, get as enough out as you can, but this company is obviously facing some repercussions for that. They, however, denied an interview with CNBC and said that they defend its authentication process and has no tolerance for counterfakes. They are being sued right now by Chanel for fakes, so it's not just CNBC that have found some errors with this. But that's an interesting piece about just, more of a national brand, I guess. I didn't know it was a national brand, but I live under a rock sometimes. But it was an interesting piece for sure to learn about, what it takes to go inside a company and see, real not being so real. So I encourage you to read both of those links and check them out. I hope you guys enjoyed this, trying to make it a little bit more visual, learning that iPhone is a little bit more difficult to work with though too. You can't just flip the camera. Crazy, right? Well, hope you guys enjoyed, and I hope you have a great week as well. Bye.